In this lesson, we'll learn how to add the appearance of wetness to our runner's shoes. Okay, so we've been kind of working our way down here. Now we're almost done with the water up top, but I think that probably if these runners' legs were made out of water, then they'd probably be getting the shoes all wet, or at least there'd be some remnants of water on them. So let's go ahead and jump over here to the shoes, and I've made a wet shoes group here with a layer inside it, and I want to go ahead and let's go ahead and sample one of these darker green colors from the sole of the shoe, maybe something around right there. And I'm going to come in and begin kind of painting this in. Now, I'm going to drop the layer opacity down to around 65% or so, just so I can kind of see what I'm painting here. I don't want to get up into that white area because I'm looking at the material these shoes are made out of, and the green area in these shoes appears to be more like a fabric, while this lighter area up here looks like it might be more plasticky. So I don't think the water would soak in there, but I think that it would definitely do so on these this green area down here. So we'll just come in and paint in kind of a water stain. Just like so. If we need to, we can come in and use our eraser to clean that up. Now I'm using this brush right here for both my eraser and my paintbrush so that I can use the pressure sensitivity of my tablet to control the width of my stroke, but not the opacity or the flow. So we'll come in here just like so. Now this is something we may want to layer underneath the splashes. We may have to examine that because it looks like we painted over a splash here, but I may do that here in just a little bit. Let's focus on creating this watery effect. All right, so I'm just going to kind of erase away at that a little bit and make it look like the water's kind of dripped down. Maybe something like that. May need to bring the water a little bit further over here. Maybe a little further down. Ultimately up to you what this ends up looking like, but let's say that looks pretty good for right now. All right, great. So at this point, that's great. We've painted in a water stain, but how do we make that feel like it belongs in the image? Because if we zoom out now, it doesn't really feel like it belongs. It really stands out, and it feels rather flat, to be honest. So let's go in and do a few things here. First thing I'm going to go ahead and do is let's change the blend mode. I'm going to change this over to maybe darken or multiply. See what the effect of both those has. Looks like multiply is quite a bit darker, so let me go with darken on that and even adjust the opacity even a little bit more of this layer, maybe down to 50%. And what I'd like to do at this point is I'm going to go ahead and convert this into a smart object because I'd like to end up blurring kind of some of this area over here when it comes to this shape, but I also want to apply a layer style here for kind of a gradient overlay. So let's do one thing at a time though. We'll right click and convert this over to a smart object. Let's go ahead and apply a Gaussian blur here. Just like so. And I'm going to ramp this up quite a bit. To right about there. And now I'm going to come in here and use my mask to mask out the edge here. Now, I want to make sure I'm painting into the mask with black. So let me hit D on my keyboard to reset my colors to default. And then I can kind of come in here and make sure that that edge right there isn't blurring. Just like so. All right, now if I want to maybe use a softer brush, maybe something with the pressure-sensitive nature of the tablet turned on for the opacity control, and we'll drop the opacity down pretty low here. I can come in here and maybe just kind of make it a little less blurry in this area here. Maybe sort of like that. It's starting to look pretty good. I may feather that a little bit more, but let's go ahead and move on. I want to go ahead and apply a layer style to this layer as well. So we'll just double click on that layer, and let's come over here and kind of drag this to the side so we can kind of see what's going on here. I want to come in and apply a gradient overlay. So I'll go ahead and click on that here. Not color overlay, but gradient overlay. There we go. So I've got this gradient overlay on, and what I want to do is, the first thing I'm going to do is reverse the gradient. We're working with the linear gradient right here that is kind of moving up and down based on this angle dial right here. So let's go ahead and click on the gradient bar here next to adjust the colors in the gradient. Go ahead and select this color here, and that's black right now. I don't want that to be black. I want it to be this color. And I want this next color over here, for this color stop, I want that to be, that's actually Alt drag on this stop, and we're going to make that the exact same color, except we're going to select this one up here and change the opacity of it to 0. Sort of like that. We'll go ahead and hit OK. Might change the blend mode also over to, I believe we used darken before. And so now what we've got here is we've got a layer style that's applying this color. Now if we click OK on this, now we can come in here and hide this gradient overlay, and you can see that nothing is changing here. That's because we've got a fill color on that. So I'm going to drop that fill slider down, and let's see if we can't take that down just a little bit here. Let's just take it all the way down to 0 so we can look at the effect of the gradient overlay. And now I can come back into it and I can make changes to my gradient. So if I want to shrink the scale of the gradient down some, sort of like this, you can see here how it's sharpening that up all the way to where it's just a flat line. Don't want to shrink it down quite that much. If I wanted to experiment with it, I could always switch over to maybe radial and really kind of ramp this up. Now the only reason why this is going to work is because we kind of have this arc right here. But we can come over here and just click and reposition that gradient. You can see that. But I think I'm going to go ahead and stick with linear. I think that's going to work out best for us. We'll go ahead and shrink that scale back down and drag the gradient around. Maybe something like that. That's starting to look pretty good. Let's zoom out on that and see how that looks. Now, I may need to bring that gradient down yet a little bit more here. Maybe something like that. I think that's looking pretty good. I think that looks like that shoe is wet. Now, with the exception of the highlights, the stain itself looks really good. So now when it comes to these highlights, when it comes to wet materials, those specular highlights are going to become more intense because the water is going to be reflecting that light. So let's go into our paint over layer here and see if there's not something we can't do about that. Let's come over, maybe we sample one of these highlights on the shoe itself. Maybe we come over and grab something like this color right here, and we'll go ahead and grab maybe this brush without the diameter changing in the brush tip, and let's come in and turn up opacity here. So I'm going to look here at kind of the natural highlight. You can see how there's sort of this line right here where the shadow breaks and the highlight starts. So I'm going to come in and just kind of, on my paint over layer, I'm going to come in and make some strokes right in there. Just on the wet area. Then I'm going to come in with my smudge tool, this tool right over here, and let's choose that same brush. I'll leave my strength set at about 50% for right now. And I'm going to just start smudging this around, see if I can't kind of taper that out and blend it in just a little bit. Now let's come in here with our eraser tool and see if we can't maybe feather away at that some. So I'll turn on that pressure sensitive opacity and just sort of feather away at that a little bit. You can see here how that highlight looks a little bit more like wet fabric. It's a little bit more intense. Now we could come in here at this point and use our brush tool. Let's set it to something like maybe this particular brush. And we could start to kind of add in some more of these highlights in areas, maybe along this ridge right here. Depends on really where the light source is hitting. For this particular shoe, I don't know that we're going to necessarily need it, unless we want to come in really fine and just kind of hit right along there, sort of like that. Maybe right along here. Totally up to you. So in this lesson, we've learned how to add sort of a wetness to the fabric areas in this left shoe. Now we still have the right shoe left to do. I'll go ahead and do that in between lessons. It's going to be the exact same process, but ultimately, depending on what areas you want to add wetness to, these techniques should work. You could even come in here and begin to add wetness maybe to the sole of the shoe as well. Maybe these dark areas get a little darker, and maybe the little highlights on them become a little bit more intense. So go ahead and feel free to take that as far as you want to, but in the next lesson, we're going to go ahead and move on. I'm going to come in here and think that, well, you know, if these shoes are wet, then they're probably leaving wet footprints. So let's go ahead and work on some footprints on the pavement here in the next lesson.